Yes, it's not.
It is,
All right, you're live.
it is extremely useful.
Welcome, everybody, to House General and Housing. Today is Wednesday, March 27th, 2025. Our first item on our agenda are to go over the amendments to H 479, the Omnibus Housing Bill. The amendments are from the House Ways and Means Committee and then the House Appropriations Committee. And then we will get testimony from the clerk of the House about the constitutional amendment process. And then finally, later in the morning, a review of the Senate bill, the bill which is coming out of the Senate, although we don't formally have possession of it. So as to the first item, which is straw polls, Cameron, you want to go ahead and take it away?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. I'll walk through the two amendments with you relatively quickly. They're pretty straightforward. If you all remember, your committee bill here was introduced on the House as H 479. From there, it was referred to the Committee on Ways and Means because it does have taxes in the bill. And so I'm going to share with you.
Both of them are on the committee page.
Both of these amendments are on your committee page. This is the amendment that was approved by the Committee on Ways and Means. There are 4 amendments. However, there's really only 2 substantive pieces to it. The first and second instance of amendment are striking section 6. These are the tax credits for the Vermont Housing Finance Agency for the first generation home buyer program and the down payment assistance program.
I'm sorry, I'm having, which,
What page?
what are we?
We're on page 1 of the amendment from the Committee on Ways and Means.
What date will I
Look under
find
date. All right, look under today's date.
I have
You have to
refresh.
refresh, yeah.
Okay, there it is. So Ways and Means Amendments.
Yes, ma'am. That's what we're walking through first. Yes.
You're having the same trouble as
Yeah,
me?
just got this.
Thank you.
Okay. So the Committee on Ways and Means, if you were dealing right now with section 6, this was the section related to tax credits, Vermont Housing Finance Agency. They're wanting to implement, or I should say, put into statute the ability to issue tax credits for the first generation home buyer program, if you recall. And then they were also wanting to extend the tax credits for, I'm on page 3 here, extend the tax credits for the down payment assistance program for an additional 5 years. They expire in FY26. They wanted to extend them out to FY31. This first instance of amendment just strikes section 6, reinstitutes it exactly as you all passed it. I needed to do a technical cleanup and just fix an edit issue. So the first instance of amendment isn't changing anything. The second instance of amendment, as you will see here, is the primary substantive piece. They're wanting to sunset that first generation tax credit. This was the recommendation on Ways and Means. You have the down payment assistance tax credit expires after 5 years. You're extending it out 5 years. The first generation home buyer tax credit did not have an expiration on it as it came out of this committee. Ways and Means was proposing to put a sunset on that of 5 years. So that's what this second amendment is doing. As you can see, we're striking out first generation home buyer, and then we're going to strike out the first generation home buyer tax credit language. And they're going to repeal that after 5 years. So that's the second amendment. Third instance of amendment here on the top of page 5 is striking out the section related to the municipal authority to do 1% tax on short-term rentals. And then the last instance of amendment is fixing the effective date because they are sunsetting that tax credit. We need to change the effective date because the repeal of the tax credit will go into effect July 1, 2030. So changing the effective date to put that into law. That was the Ways and Means Amendment. That came out of Ways and Means 1010.
Okay. My question is, I'm wondering before we go on, whether we shouldn't take a straw poll on this amendment. Just to clarify, everybody, remember, first of all, of course, this is all gone. As you can see, it's all gone.
Yeah.
But for this amendment, remember the two programs are kind of different in the way they're conceived. The down payment assistance program, where what Maura Collins came and testified, she just needed an extra 5 years. The reason is it's a revolving fund. People, they make loans to people at, I think, 2% or something like that, but the loans are repaid on refinancing or sale of the house. So they figured that enough sales would occur to make it kind of self-perpetuating in 5 years, and they were wrong for various reasons having to do with the nature of the market. So they needed an extra 5 years. The other program was a new program to help first-gen home buyers, many of whom are people of color. And that was to be a grant, just a $15,000 grant to help pay down the price. You can't use the grant for any purpose. It was for buying down the price of the house. And that is a pay-as-you-go. It's every year they just would sell the tax credits to a bank or whatever, get money and make a loan. And so Ways and Means said, let's see how it goes and put a sunset on it. Let's do it for 5 years and see how we feel. That's what their amendment was. Have I stated it okay?
To my recollection of the discussion, yes, sir.
Okay. So
This is only about the,
Ways and Means only.
yeah, and only about the down payment loan, not the first gen, right?
It's both. They took the first gen and left it in,
Okay.
and they took they left the first, no, they took the down payment assistance and left it as we did.
Yes.
They took the first gen and put a 5-year sunset on it. They took the 1% additional tax on housing because it was too complicated to administer on short-term rentals and took it out. That's their amendment. I just want to say, this is now me speaking. Yeah,
1% tax was too complicated for
it
who?
was too complicated for the Department of Taxes to administer. I don't know all the reasons. I'm just saying it
It was
wasn't,
municipalities that were going to be.
yeah, well, either way, it was too complicated. But I don't know, I do know, there was already a 3% tax imposed and a 9% tax, but I don't think it was policy reasons. I think it was administrative reasons that caused them to do what they did. Okay, I just want to speak for myself now, and then any committee member who wants to do before we vote. I am not thrilled with all of the amendments, certainly not on appropriations, as we'll hear. But I feel that our bill overall is intact after all of the amendments, this one and the one that's going to be presented in a minute. And I am going to support both because I want to launch this as powerfully as possible. And then, we've got another shot with the Senate bill, and this is the beginning of a process. We have another shot in the coming session, and we'll do what we can do, but this is a beginning, and I certainly support both, but I support and urge the same on the rest of you. Committee comments or thoughts before we take a straw poll, which I'll just do by show of hands. Okay, all those who would report favorable for the Ways and Means Committee amendment, raise your hands, please. Okay, that's 10. It's 10 of 1, 2,
Nine.
903. 902, 11. Yeah, right. Okay. 902.
Okay.
Go ahead.
In the interest of time,
Yes.
keep us going.
Yeah.
So we're going to switch over to the Appropriations Committee, right? So the bill came out of Ways and Means, 1010, goes over to the Appropriations Committee because it obviously has a lot of appropriations built in. The Appropriations Committee, did a walkthrough of the bill, had a few questions for myself, for the chair. And then here is their amendment. My understanding, as is kind of, typical for the Appropriations Committee and standard practice, their desire is to strip out all of the funding from the bill in order to consolidate all of that information over into the budget. So when we got there, part of what they wanted to remove was not only the appropriations sections, if you all recall, there were two. One section related to positions for the Department of Housing and Community Development. There was another section where we listed all of the other appropriations. There was also the appropriation for the Universal Design Study Committee. And then there was the tax credits that were still in there after the recommendation from Ways and Means. So we were taking all of that information out. Because of the way the structure of the Ways and Means Amendment, because there are multiple instances, most of them dealing with the tax credits, but then there was buried the third instance of amendment to remove the municipal 1% tax that they wanted to keep. They wanted to keep that amendment. In order to do what appropriations wanted to do, it was going to become very difficult to wordsmith it correctly into an amendment. How this would typically happen for those who are new, you would have appropriations would recommend to amend the report of the Committee on Ways and Means. And so they would be striking certain sections, keeping sections, but having to renumber it because they have their own amendments. So it just, from a words perspective, got a little challenging. So in working with the House Clerk, we decided that the best option to move this forward was to have appropriations recommend. So this is the appropriations recommendation here, to substitute the amendment for the Committee on Ways and Means and to amend the bill as follows. So that's how this would work on the floor, is the Ways and Means amendment would be substituted for what you have on this piece of paper.
It'll still be probably voted on twice.
How I understand it is you would vote to substitute the amendment for Ways and Means, yes or no? Yes. Okay, now you need to vote to approve the amendment, yes or no? So what this would do is, again, the most straightforward thing this amendment's doing, it's stripping out all the money. So in the first section, section 4, Universal Design Study Committee, we're removing the appropriation and we're replacing it with language that says, notwithstanding subsection G, which is the per diems for legislative members and others, notwithstanding that, the per diems shall only be available in the event an appropriation is made in fiscal year 26 from the general fund to the Department of Housing and Community Development for that purpose. And I can tell you that that was in the budget recommendation. So that's in the budget recommendation, but that's the language that's going to be inserted. And then moving forward, second, we're striking out section 6 in its entirety. So this is the tax credits piece, striking that out. Striking out section 16, which is the municipal 1% tax. Striking out, this is the fourth instance of amendment on the top of page 2. If you recall, there was a $250,000 for the report for VHFA to continue to develop offsite housing construction. That report was in there. So in that section, we're removing that first sentence. So we're taking the appropriations piece out of that. So the report is still a requirement. It just doesn't have an appropriation for it. They wanted to then add a section which says that, and you can see here on the fifth instance of amendment, section 19, the duty to do that report is contingent on funds appropriated in FY26. So if funds are not appropriated, they don't have to do the report. My understanding is funds were not appropriated. So they're not going to do the report. Unless they
can decide to do it.
unless they so choose, yes.
Okay.
And then finally, it is just striking out section 20 and 21, which, as I said, are the positions, and then all of the appropriations. So again, the key piece of this amendment is we're just striking out all the money because they want it to go in the budget and be consolidated there. And keeping the recommendation of Ways and Means to strike the 1% on the municipal.
Right. Now you all have the chart, which was prepared by James Duffy. Thank you, James, here, in case we have questions. Basically, what it comes out is on page 1, you'll see the offsite construction report is the second item, it's gone. everything else is in, although for less money, until you get to the second page when most of it's gone. Essentially, the resident service program was not funded. The grants to the 5 NeighborWorks affiliated homeownership center were not funded. Home Share Vermont did get funded. The grant for SASH for All pilot, continue it, was not funded, which I think means that unless some other money is found, the SASH for All pilot program will end. The grants, the 2 workforce development programs, one to the Vermont State Colleges and one through the Department of Labor to Associated General Councils, was not funded. The recovery residences, the first of our 2 was funded for $300,000. But the 5 first months for individuals entering recovery, first month fees was not. So, and the rest were not funded. There are fewer positions funded. The land bank was funded at 7.5 million, which I think is a start. The MIR program was fully funded, MIHR, the manufactured home improvement and repair. The middle income home ownership and the rental housing were funded. They were not funded together, as Maura Collins requested. They were funded separately, a little less money than requested for the latter, for the revolving loan fund. BHIP was fully funded, although it's not all the positions they requested. And VHCB received 5 million. As opposed, so that's the summary of how things came out. I will say, if you look at the bottom of the page, we asked for 71 million, we got 37 million, 35 million. No, 37 million.
Yeah, 36,850.
I will say, generally speaking, they had $7 of request for every $1 they had. So as unhappy as I am
1 for 2.
with what we got, at the same time, we did relatively well. And of course, as I mentioned yesterday, there's no question in my mind that part of this was because of a desire to return to the days which we used to have where the budget was passed with an 11-0 vote out of appropriations on a bipartisan basis. That did not happen in the last 2 years. And I think there was a real desire to do that this year. And that doesn't happen easily. You know, there are trade-offs that happen. So that both Democrats and Republicans and others get some of what they want, but not all. So questions, thoughts by the committee before we have a straw poll?
I don't think it's in here. James, I could be wrong. It may be language in the memo from Joint Fiscal Office, but the tax credits did not
Yes.
make it.
James, you want to comment on that? Introduce yourself for the record.
The record things, Deputy Joint Fiscal Office. The table that you're looking at, that Cameron has put behind him, is strictly appropriations. So it doesn't speak to the true tax credits, the down payment assistance and first generation assistance tax credits. These were stripped from the bill as introduced through the HAP amendments, appropriation amendments, and are also not included in the big bill. Chairman Hawley, I did confirm with Joint Fiscal that foreseeably those tax credits could have been included in either the housing bill or the big bill. Either one of those statutes could be a vehicle for those tax credits, but as it stands now, they're in neither.
I will say, as a general matter, I think people should assume this is the way things are for this round. Things could change a little because of the next step after today, assuming our bill is voted out, is a negotiation, really a three-way negotiation. It'll be commerce and us on this side, and housing and commerce on the other side, on the Senate side. We just all have to get together and try to work out a bill. Final bill. And it's not that hard in the sense that it's not that their bill contains wildly different positions on things in our bill. It's generally speaking, their bill does a pretty good job of addressing issues that we didn't address. So it'll be a broader bill. And so, for example, their bill contains a tax increment financing. Ours did not. That was deliberate. And so it's coming back over to us. And in a little bit, we're going to be talking about S-127, which is that bill. So comments, or are we ready to vote? Yes.
I just have a quick question that whether you happen to know the middle income homeownership development program that got 10 million and
Right.
the rental revolving loan fund for 7.5 million. Do you know if they even considered reducing those slightly to put the 250 and 250 into?
No.
No,
I
okay,
do know that it was late Friday night and there was a lot happening very quickly. And whether everything that happens is fully intentional is something I cannot attest to. It's just very difficult. There were so many happening and the BAA made it more difficult. So I think there is a certain amount of frustration, but I don't know.
it's frustrating because it just seems like the first time and first gen, really, like those are people that really are barred from generational wealth, and we've been really intentional in trying to help those, and it's such bang for our buck
Right.
when we do. And it was 250 a year. And this is so much more for middle income housing. That and rental revolving, it just like, that's just
Yeah.
feeding the beast. It's not getting people out of poverty for generations. So I'm frustrated. I'm sure there might be a reason. There might
Yeah.
be
Well,
some logic I'm missing, but
I do think that there's an emphasis on what's called middle income, it's just the price of unanimity. But I will say, I think we could take another run at this. Whether it's this year or not remains to be seen. I agree with everything you just said. But I do feel personally, I'm speaking now not as chair, just as a member, that the best thing we can do is give this as much momentum as we can.
yeah.
Where? Sorry, I was just, I think,
Oh, you're
where were
on.
you looking, Jade? Where were you
She would-
happy with?
Just the fact that this passed, the middle income homeownership development program and the rental housing revolving loan fund got a pretty good chunk, 10 million and 7.5 million.
Yep.
But the VHFA programs that help first-time homeowners or
is
first-generation
right.
homeowners, which is on the back page with all the cuts, got completely eliminated.
Yeah, it's not even on here. The
Gotcha.
elimination of
They
it,
eliminated
because
that
tax
section of it.
credits. It
Gotcha.
doesn't, it doesn't work the same way.
Yeah, and they were tax credits. They
Yeah,
weren't
yeah,
even
credit,
like
yeah.
money.
Well, which is an expenditure, but essentially,
Well, I can't add that. Sorry.
yeah.
They stripped the whole thing right out.
What they did is they stripped out the whole bill. Yeah.
Yep.
Any questions of Cameron or other thoughts before we take a straw poll?
Yes. Can you suggest to amend theirs?
You can always put an amendment on the floor. It's not impossible for that to be done by a member of the committee, but you could have someone else do it, or you, yes.
Our committee can't.
What?
Our committee can't.
I don't know the answer to that.
This is just to take it or
I
leave
don't
it.
believe that the committee can make a amendment that nature at this point. You all can as individuals.
We can just say we accepted it. That's all.
Yeah,
You as individuals can offer to amend the report, or you can offer your own individual amendments of the bill after it has been
Gotcha.
amended or rejected as recommended by the Appropriations Committee.
I think if you want to do that, you should, it just so happens that we have the maestro of all of this and sitting in the room. After she talks to us about the next item on the agenda, I would urge that you think that through. So Sally, you have just arrived in time. We have gone through the we took a straw poll on the Ways and Means bill. And now we've finished having presented to us the appropriations bill, which took out, it did a pretty good job of keeping in the major funded things, but it took out many of the small things, including the tax credit. So any other questions, comments before we vote?
Just one, the land bank.
It's in. Oh,
Can't find it on the.
no, the land bank
The Land Bank does not have an appropriation.
didn't have it.
It is a report from the Department of Housing.
It does not have an appropriation attached to it, okay.
So, those in favor of the amendment from the Appropriations Committee, please raise your hands. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. So I count right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's 9, 1, 1. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I will join you later this morning to start talking about S-127. And I will comment as I'm leaving the chair that individual taking my place was my first supervisor after I became an attorney in the state of Vermont. So you should give her a hard time.
Noted.
Thank you, Cameron, for everything.
You're welcome. I will see you again shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Appreciate it. So the next item on the agenda is, and we are going to have referred to us today a constitutional amendment. And although there's no terrible rush about what we do with it, we felt that it would be good to know what is the process that we have to go through with a constitutional amendment, and thus invited none other than the total authority on the subject, Betsy Ann Rask, who is the clerk of our house. Betsy Ann, would you please join us?
Hello, thank you. So happy Cameron's back in action here. For the record, Betsy Ann Rask, clerk of the house, and I'm so happy to be here today to talk about one of my favorite topics, this beautiful document, which is the Vermont Constitution, and specifically the procedure to amend the Constitution, because you have had referred to you PR3, because the designation is given to propose amendments to the Constitution. And you also.
What does PR stand for?
Our proposal.
Proposal.
Yes. Yes. Thank you to committee staff for posting the document that I sent. So I have provided to you, the committee, an overview document of the procedure to amend the Vermont Constitution. It's on your committee page through the awesomeness of your committee staff. So I can review with you that document. But I will just tee it up by saying that our Vermont Constitution is really, my biased opinion, a really wonderful document. Of course, it's the people's document, because ultimately all amendments to the Constitution must be ratified by the voters. And so in that way, this is our preeminent charter for our state. And it's always, what its contents always are in the hands of ultimately the voters because they approve, they determine whether to ratify any amendments to our Constitution. And according to NCSL, the National Conference of State Legislatures, at around 8,500 words, we have the shortest constitution in the nation. And that is likely due to the amendment process. I'll be reviewing with you today our current amendment process, but we used to be under a 10-year time lock on amendments to the Constitution. That changed about the 1960s, mid-1960s, when we were required to amend our Constitution to comply with federal law, which always controls in regard to our legislative representation. We used to have one town, one vote in our House. Now we're one person, one vote, because one town, one vote violated the federal equal protection clause. So when we had to amend our Constitution to comply with federal law for the legislature, at that time, we also amended our Constitution to provide our current amendment process, which is more of a 4-year time lock. And so what the document that I provided today reviews with you is that the process to amend our Constitution is a 4-year process. It involves a proposal to amend the Constitution that can only be offered by the Senate every other biennium. And then once the Senate proposes an amendment to the Constitution in that biennium, the House can only concur. And if it makes it that far, an amendment goes back to the next legislature. And then the Senate must concur again in the proposal and the House must concur again before it gets sent to the voters for ratification. And so where you are right now is in that second biennium. So PR3 is one of the only 2 proposed amendments to the Constitution that have made it to this biennium. It's now been concurred in by the Senate, and now it's back to you here in the House to determine whether it should ultimately get sent to the voters. So, Mr. Chair, may I please share screen on this document? We can review it together.
Please.
All right.
I want you to know that you are the very first person of the less than 100 and more than 50 who have testified before us, who have ever asked me as opposed to our assistant.
Always the legwork beforehand, so I can get the Zoom link, but Mr. Chair, this is your committee, so I'm asking your permission. See the member from Colchester.
So that could mean that a whole new house, if it goes into the second or third year.
Yeah, it is. In fact, I think.
That's the
deliberate.
point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's very deliberate consideration of these proposed amendments to the Constitution, and you are that second house to look at this proposed amendment.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Could you make it a little bigger? Maybe you can.
Yes, I can. Let's see. Ooh. Let's try it again, even more. How's that?
Great, thanks.
Super. All right, so this document is a document that I have on our Clerk of the House webpage. I have some other documents up there that provide overview in regard to Vermont governmental structure issues. But this document is specifically in regard to what you're here today to discuss. This document provides an overview of the procedure to amend the Constitution. So it just starts with an intro, and it's a reference doc for you. It just starts with an introduction going over what I just indicated, which is this document, as the Vermont Constitution provides, in the chapter 1 provides our rights, chapter 2 provides our plan or frame of government. And of course, as a constitutional document, the Constitution itself must provide its own procedure on how it gets amended. So what this document requires is that 2 biennium consideration followed by voter ratification. And it requires statute to conform to the constitutional requirements to carry out the requirements of amending the Constitution. And then each chamber's rules also provide details on how to conform to those requirements. So section 2 of this document provides the actual text of the constitutional amendment process. It's set forth in chapter 2, section 72. You can see it provides that at this specific biennial session back in 1975, and at the biennial session every 4th year thereafter, meaning every other biennium, the Senate, by a vote of 2/3 of its members, may propose amendments to the Constitution. with the concurrence of a majority of the members of the House, with the amendment as proposed by the Senate. And again, that means that only the Senate can propose amendments, and it has that specific threshold that the Senate must propose an amendment. And then from there on out, it's only a concurrence. And then it provides that if an amendment passes, a proposed amendment passes the Senate in that first biennium, it goes to the House, which must concur in that amendment by a majority of the members of the House. And then it goes on to say, a proposed amendment so adopted by the Senate and concurred in by the House shall be referred again to the next session of the General Assembly. And that's where you are now. And it says if in that last session, a majority of the members of the Senate and a majority of the House concur in the proposed amendment, it's the duty of the General Assembly to submit the proposal directly to the voters of the state. And a proposed amendment submitted to the voters of the state that is approved by a majority of the voters voting thereon becomes an amendment to the Constitution of the state.
So in the first biennium, it's 2/3. And the
Yes.
second one, it's just a majority.
Excellent note here. The thresholds, it's higher in the first biennium and now we're at a lower voting threshold.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's a great point. So the governor's role in this, unlike in bills legislation, the governor's only role here in the Constitution is to give notice by proclamation that there is a proposed amendment to the Constitution. And then this last provision of this section provides that the General Assembly provides for the manner of voting on amendments and enacts legislation to carry the provisions into effect. So here's the summary. If you need a quick summary of what this section is really saying, it allows amendments to the Vermont Constitution to be proposed only in the Senate and only every other biennium. So last biennium was a proposing biennium. Once the Senate proposes an amendment to the Vermont Constitution, House can only vote on whether to concur. House cannot propose further amendments. So that's what happened last session. Constitutional proposal adopted by the Senate, concurred in by the House at that proposing biennium, which was last biennium, then must be concurred again by both chambers. No more amendments in the subsequent biennium. This is the subsequent biennium, as I call it. So the chamber vote requirements, just as you member from West Windsor were saying, are higher in the proposing biennium than they are in this biennium.
Does this mean that there is at no point, including the original, once the Senate has voted to approve a text, the text cannot be amended?
That's correct.
So there's no back and forth between the House and the Senate, even the first time around.
Right, that is correct, Mr. Chair. There is, I provided in footnote 1, there is a provision in, that referring to the two, proposals. There is the ability for the Senate in that first biennium to request the proposal to come back. The House would need to agree to send it back. If after it made it out of the Senate thought, oh, wait, we should consider some other details to add in, the Senate could at least request the proposal back to go back to the Senate, and then the Senate could amend and send it back to the House, but that's not where we're at now. That's only the proposing amendment.
So that could be a vehicle. The House could notify the Senate of concerns. The Senate would be up to them whether they take it back and do it again.
That was last biennium.
That would be, it's been last biennium, but right now, that's all over. It's up or down.
You're locked in. Yep. Concur or not concur.
So if the Senate is sending it over to the House for concurrence, does it still come to our committee? It does,
It does.
but then if the Senate is sending it to the whole body, why does it come to our committee?
It's by the chamber rules. It's the same thing with the
Okay,
Senate.
okay.
And I'll go through those details with you. It's another great question. Because we do have one House rule, unlike the Senate rules, which you'll see in this document. They have really robust rules on how to handle a proposed amendment to the Constitution. We have one, and I'll review it with you. It's House Rule 51A, which does require referral to a committee. So it does go through the standard committee process of consideration, as you as the members who are focused on this policy issue in PR3.
Well, it makes sense since all we're doing is concurring.
Right, and recommending ultimately whether the House should concur again.
I mean, we could recommend against the House concurring, but it goes to the House in any case. correct?
You could have it hang on the wall if you wanted to, like a bill.
That happened recently, didn't it?
In a proposed amendment?
Yeah,
There are
Couple
some
new biennials.
in the Senate. Yes, there are definitely proposed amendments to the Constitution that never made it out of Senate committee. I think last biennium, I want to say we had at least five, maybe. I can go back and check, but only two made it out. And made it this far.
I thought the year that we had Prop 1 and Prop I think 3, that there was another one that got dropped, one that made it out of the Senate, but got dropped by.
I'd have to go back and check. All right, so this document gives details regarding the constitutional amendment procedure. It starts out with the details for the proposing biennium. We're beyond that now, so I won't go through these with you, but it does show the Senate rules that apply. And then the House rules that apply, but that was last biennium. There's an interim publication requirement. And now where you are now is in that subsequent biennium. So it started again in the Senate. You can see the process this biennium in the Senate. Senate Committee on Rules requires the proposal to be printed in the calendar. And it provides the Senate vote. And then it comes back here to the House. And this is where we are now. We have that one rule, House Rule 51A, which requires that when a proposal is messaged to the House from the Senate, it gets referred to a committee of jurisdiction. If the proposal is considered, meaning if you want to pursue it, if you want to take it off to the wall, the committee is required to conduct a public hearing prior to voting on the proposal. And so here we are in a committee meeting. There's really no defined term of what is a public hearing, but the way that it has been administered in the past is that you should have get one of the meeting rooms, hearing rooms like room 11, or even use the House chamber to actually hold a full public hearing where you can take public comment on the proposed amendment to the Constitution.
We did that last biennium.
Yes, you should have. Yes, I think you did. Yeah, to hold your public hearing on this issue.
We had, the last time it was with us, the first time around, we held the public hearing.
Yes, in the pavilion.
In the pavilion? Okay.
Yeah, because room 11 wasn't available.
Yes.
That's where we
I've been through 4 public hearings in appropriations because there's a public hearing always on both the PAA and the budget. And a lot of people appear remotely and everybody's given a certain amount of time to talk, 2 minutes, for example, and they have to sign up ahead of time. And then it's run by the chair, but then there's help. In our case, it would be Magali, timing everybody and warning them that they gotta stop, and then they're stopped.
And sometimes nobody shows up.
Sometimes, yeah. We had 200 for the budget hearing.
For Prop 1, I think there were like 3 people who showed up.
You want to make sure, I think, that you have adequate public notice and that it's getting out, that so as many people can see it as possible.
How do we usually give notice here?
You can do press releases. I would say also include it on your webpage, the legislative webpage. Those are the 2 main ways. And I bet probably committee staff, maybe you can also speak with other committee staff to see how it's been, those have been administered before in the notice that has been provided.
Yes.
Is there a time frame that the notice has to be posted?
There is not, but so just whatever you feel is adequate to get the word out there.
But is there a time frame for the House to act?
You have all biennium. Yeah, we are at the midway point of the first year of the biennium, but you can take all biennium for this.
As long as it can be voted on in the November election?
Right, yes, November of 26, where are we, 25? Yeah.
26.
Where are we, 26, sorry, losing track of the years.
But if we pass it out, right, like, let's say we were able to pass it out of the whole House tomorrow. Would it then go to the voters this November? It would still wait until the end of the
The
biennium.
general election,
Okay.
yeah.
Whatever its deadlines are. The Secretary of State's deadlines for publishing ballot. So,
Well, hopefully, I would think, you'll be out of here, some point in
Yeah.
2026. Right, Mr. Chair? We can make that happen.
we make that happen.
Early summer.
So the notices that, because I've seen notices for Prop 3 in the local newspaper and such, those count as public notice. So we would have to then do, I don't even know, because it was in my local newspaper. How does that get to your local newspaper? Who? Oh, I see there's an answer. How does that get to like the local, who establishes the public notice?
I think that's through the wonder of our committee staff and just providing the press releases and asking, we have a standard press release list, I think, to go to some of those local newspapers.
Yeah, and each local newspaper has its own time deadlines, et cetera, and somebody in this place, I'm not sure who, will be able to help our committee assistant to, deal with that.
All right, so in that Rule 51A, where you are right now is that first bullet point that it's referred to the Committee of Jurisdiction. That happened yesterday, so you have it. So if the proposal is considered, that's the if, because it's like any other piece of legislation. The rule does require you to hold that public hearing prior to voting on the proposal. So that means before it goes to the House, before you report it out of your committee. If you're going to report it out of your committee, with the recommendation that it move forward. Basically, if you're reporting it out of the committee, it's usually that you're reporting it favorably. So you'll need to do that public hearing beforehand. And the public hearing is to give you information about the public's perspective on this and whether it should move forward. And then you make your legislative decision about whether to pursue it. So there are special notice provisions required in our notice calendar for proposed amendments to the Constitution. If it is voted out of committee, it's going to appear on the notice calendar for 4 legislative days and be up for action on the 5th legislative day. And then it's an up or down vote, whether to concur. And as was mentioned previously, it's that lower threshold. So here the language is for this biennium, the House must concur in the proposal by a majority of the House. Now, last biennium, the threshold was majority of the members of the House. So that meant at least 76. But here, because it's not House members, it's just House, it means a majority of a House quorum. So your quorum, minimum quorum is 76. So if you have the bare minimum 76 here, you need to have a quorum's majority of votes cast to approve. So if only the bare minimum 76 House members are present to constitute a quorum and vote, at least 39 of them must approve. But if there are 100 members present and voting, 51 must approve, et cetera. But it's your standard quorum's majority of votes cast. So again, it's a vote on whether to concur in the proposed amendment to the Constitution. If that happens, then the governor provides public notice of the proposed amendment by proclamation. That's the governor's constitutional role. And then statute provides that the Secretary of State, between a specific time frame in the fall prior to the general election, publishes the proposal and a summary of it in at least 2 newspapers. And that publication has to occur once each week for 3 successive weeks. It also requires the proposal to be published on the websites of the General Assembly and Office of the Secretary of State for the same duration. And then because this is the people's document, ultimately belongs to the people, proposal is submitted to the voters of the state for the question on whether to ratify, and it's a ratification by majority vote. And that's a constitutional vote threshold. And statute provides that it occurs at the general election, so the 2026 general election. And it's noted here that the past practice, what are the voters actually going to see on the ballot if it makes it that far? They only see the actual text of the proposed amendment and not the section 1 findings or purpose, for example. So this one, we currently have as a standard, a purpose. This one is short, other ones have been longer. But voters, if the Secretary of State, when preparing the ballot, goes with prior practice, the voters will just see the actual text of the proposed amendment to be voted on. And then there is just provisions in statutory law about tabulating the returns when that happens between the governor and the Secretary of State. And then the governor would issue a proclamation attested by the Secretary of State announcing whether the voters ratified the proposal. to make it become part of our constitution. That is our process.
Questions of our witness? I think you have been so clear that there are no questions.
Excellent, that's the best kind. All right.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have something else that you wanted to ask me?
No, someone may seek you out.
Okay, great. We were just.
So, actually, I have a question, Betsy, are there any more of those small, of those? Yeah,
Absolutely, in the bookshelf right outside my office.
thank you.
Yeah.
There's also some right up there.
Oh, hooray. Perfect.
There are? Thank you.
I did see some before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we, at this point, it's just, our agenda shows committee meeting at 10:30. We're gonna go over what Act 127. And Cameron will be here, but not before. So the only thing I would just ask is, do committee met two things. One is, for those of you who are participating in the report today, note, if you don't already know, that today's calendar does not contain the text of the bill. So what you can say is the section number of the bill. And you can also say the page number of the bill. I'm not sure.
Draft 9.1.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether this printed version is the same in terms of its pagination.
I'll look at that.
Yeah, but I think it's good enough to go by section. I will state at the beginning of my summary, which, is like 3 minutes long or 4 minutes long. I will say that they can follow along, that they can find it on our committee webpage where Magali has taken she has taken
It's saved as a highlight, so you don't have to go into the day to find a copy. It's just right there on the web
On the left-hand column, far left of the page.
At the bottom of our committee membership.
So it's, I'll refer people to that. Also, do people feel ready? Is there anyone who has a question or thoughts? And you have the order, so you know who you're referring to. Yes,
Are we going to go through it?
would you like to?
I'd like to,
Okay, yes, what were you gonna say?
like a rehearsal, I think.
What were you gonna say?
I was going to ask, what happened to Brownfield, the Brownfield funding?
I know, I think the brownfield funding is gone, but I don't know if they. We'll have to ask. The brownfield sections in which we asked for, in which they're giving priority are, and there's a study on how they can be faster, they're in the bill. It's the $2 million appropriation. That's a good catch. So I'm going, okay. What I would suggest in terms of going through, we have a half hour. So we can do that.
If it's all the same to you, I'd rather wait until our next break, if that's all right.
We could take a break now.
Can you do that?
We can take a break now for 5 minutes. Is that what you're?
Yeah, no, I don't care when, just as long as we do it.
Well, this would be our time because S-127 is at 10:30. Well, it won't take I don't know how long that will take. But I think, is it okay with you, Elizabeth, if we just take a break and then do it?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. And if people want to read their section, they can, but I'm not going to read my whole introduction. But if people, we can just go down the list. Okay? Does that work?